Title: Be proactive, take control of your life. Subtitle _intro, Stop reacting. Start creating. The power to change is already yours. Subtitle _CTA, Learn how to take control today. Your future self will thank you. Character _prompt, Stephen Covey, elderly man in his 70s, receding gray-white hair neatly combed back, kind wise eyes behind rectangular glasses, warm grandfatherly smile with gentle wrinkles, wearing navy blue business suit with white dress shirt and burgundy tie, sitting at wooden desk with hands folded thoughtfully, photorealistic portrait, not cartoon, not illustration, professional photography, warm studio lighting, 8K quality, sharp focus, medium shot with hands visible. Story: Welcome everyone. Building on what we learned in our introduction to the 7 habits, today we dive deep into the very first habit: be proactive. This is the foundation that makes all other habits possible. In our previous episode, we explored how Stephen Covey discovered that effective people share 7 specific habits. We learned about the importance of moving from dependence to independence, and finally to interdependence. Today, we focus on the critical first step in that journey. /N/N Stephen Covey was not just a business consultant. He was a university professor who spent years studying successful people throughout history. He read hundreds of books about success, leadership, and personal development dating back over 200 years. What he discovered changed how millions of people think about their lives. /N/N Covey noticed something fascinating. The most effective people in history all shared one fundamental quality: they took responsibility for their own lives. They didn't blame circumstances, other people, or bad luck. They recognized their power to choose their response to any situation. /N/N So what problem does this habit solve? Most people live reactively. They wake up and let the day happen to them. Bad traffic makes them angry. A rude comment ruins their mood. A rainy day destroys their plans. They are like leaves blown by the wind, controlled by external forces. /N/N This reactive living creates a cycle of helplessness. When we believe that outside forces control our happiness, we give away our power. We become victims. And victims cannot change their lives because they believe they have no control. /N/N Covey's first habit breaks this cycle. Being proactive means recognizing that between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom to choose. This simple idea is revolutionary because it puts us back in the driver's seat of our own lives. /N/N Let me share the powerful story that illustrates this principle. Covey tells us about Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps during World War II. Frankl lost everything: his family, his possessions, his freedom. He endured unimaginable suffering in the camps. /N/N The Nazis could control Frankl's environment completely. They decided when he ate, slept, and worked. They could torture his body. But Frankl made a profound discovery: they could not control his mind. They could not force him to hate. They could not make him give up hope. /N/N Frankl realized he still had the ultimate human freedom, the freedom to choose his attitude. Even in the worst circumstances imaginable, he could decide how to respond. He could choose to find meaning in his suffering. He could choose to help fellow prisoners. He could choose to remain human. /N/N This is why Covey believes proactivity is so powerful. If Frankl could maintain his freedom to choose in a concentration camp, what excuse do we have? Our problems seem small in comparison. Yet we often act as if we have no choice, as if we are helpless victims of our circumstances. /n/n Covey explains that proactive people recognize they are responsible. This clever play on words means they have the ability to choose their response. Reactive people, on the other hand, are driven by feelings, circumstances, and conditions. Their emotional weather depends on the social weather around them. /n/n The first key idea is understanding the difference between our circle of concern and our circle of influence. This is one of Covey's most practical tools. Imagine two circles, one inside the other. The outer circle contains everything we care about: the weather, the economy, other people's opinions, past mistakes, future worries. /n/n The inner circle contains only things we can actually influence: our actions, our words, our attitudes, our effort, our responses. Reactive people focus their time and energy on the circle of concern. They complain about things they cannot control. This makes them feel helpless and frustrated. /n/n Proactive people focus on their circle of influence. They work on things they can actually change. And here is the beautiful paradox: when you focus on your circle of influence, it actually grows larger. When you focus on your circle of concern, your circle of influence shrinks. /n/n Covey gives a specific example from his consulting work. He once worked with a company where employees constantly complained about the president. They said he was autocratic and didn't listen. They spent hours discussing how terrible he was. This was their circle of concern. /n/n Covey asked them, "What can you actually influence?" They realized they could control the quality of their own work. They could control how they presented ideas to the president. They could control their attitude and professionalism. So they stopped complaining and focused on excellence. /n/n Something remarkable happened. As they improved their work and communication, the president began to trust them more. He listened more carefully. He gave them more responsibility. By focusing on their circle of influence, they actually expanded it. They influenced the very thing they had been complaining about. /n/n The second key idea involves understanding proactive language versus reactive language. The words we use reveal and reinforce our mindset. Reactive people say, "There's nothing I can do. That's just the way I am. They make me so angry. I have to do this." /n/n Proactive people say, "Let's look at our options. I can choose a different approach. I control my feelings. I will choose to do this." Notice the difference. Reactive language removes responsibility and power. Proactive language acknowledges choice and control. /n Covey explains why this matters so deeply. Language shapes thought, and thought shapes reality. When you say, "I have to go to work," you frame work as an obligation, something forced upon you. This creates resentment. When you say, "I choose to go to work," you acknowledge your power. You could quit, but you choose to work because you value the income. /n/n He shares the example of a student who constantly said, "I have to write this paper." Covey challenged him, "You don't have to do anything. You could choose not to write it." The student protested, "But then I'll fail." Covey replied, "Exactly. You're choosing to write the paper because you choose not to fail. Own that choice." /n/n This shift seems small, but it transforms how we experience life. When we recognize our choices, even in difficult situations, we reclaim our power. We are no longer victims. We are agents who make decisions and accept consequences. And the third key idea is making and keeping commitments to ourselves. Covey argues that the best way to expand our circle of influence is to make small promises and keep them. Every time we keep a commitment to ourselves, we build what he calls our integrity account. We learn to trust ourselves. And most people make commitments lightly and break them easily. They say, "I'll start exercising tomorrow," or "I'll stop getting angry," or "I'll be more patient." But when tomorrow comes, they find excuses. This pattern teaches them they cannot trust themselves. Their self-confidence erodes. And proactive people make small, specific commitments and honor them. Covey gives the example of deciding to wake up at 6 a.m. for 1 week. Not forever, just 1 week. This is manageable. When you keep this small promise, you prove to yourself that you can be trusted. Your circle of influence grows. And he tells a powerful story about a man who struggled with anger toward his teenage daughter. The man would explode at small things she did. He felt terrible afterward but claimed he couldn't control his temper. He said, "She makes me so angry. I can't help it." And Covey challenged this reactive language. Your daughter doesn't make you angry. You choose anger as your response. The man resisted. You don't understand. When she does certain things, I just explode. Covey asked, would you explode the same way if your boss did those things? Or a police officer? And the man paused. Well, no. That would be inappropriate. Covey smiled. So you can control your temper. You choose when to explode and when to restrain yourself. You've been choosing to explode at your daughter because the consequences seemed manageable. But you're damaging your relationship. And this realization changed everything for the man. He recognized his power to choose his response. He made a commitment to pause before reacting. He started taking responsibility for his emotions. His relationship with his daughter transformed because he stopped being a victim of his feelings. And the fourth key idea is the concept of the proactive 30-day test. Covey challenges readers to experiment with proactivity for just 1 month. This isn't a lifetime commitment, just a test. For 30 days, focus entirely on your circle of influence. Work only on things you can control. And during this test, watch your language. Replace reactive phrases with proactive ones. When you catch yourself saying, "I have to," or "if only," stop and rephrase. When you want to complain about something outside your control, redirect that energy to something you can influence. And Covey explains why he recommends this test. Many people resist the idea of proactivity because they think it means ignoring problems or accepting injustice. That's not what it means. Proactivity means focusing your energy where it can make a difference. And he gives the example of social issues. Some people feel overwhelmed by problems like poverty or climate change. They feel helpless, so they do nothing. A proactive person asks, what can I influence? Maybe you cannot solve poverty globally, but you can volunteer locally. You can donate. You can vote. You can raise awareness. And the proactive approach doesn't ignore big problems. It breaks them down into actionable steps within your circle of influence. This creates momentum and hope instead of paralysis and despair. /n/n Covey shares another memorable story about a woman who blamed her unhappy marriage on her husband. She said he was unloving and selfish. She felt like a victim. Covey asked her, "Can you love him, even if he doesn't love you back?" She was shocked by the question. /n/n She protested, "But he doesn't deserve my love." Covey responded, "That's not the question. The question is, can you choose to love? Can you choose to be kind, patient, and supportive, regardless of how he acts?" This shifted her focus from her circle of concern, her husband's behavior, to her circle of influence, her own behavior. /n/n The woman decided to try. For 30 days, she acted lovingly without expecting anything in return. She focused on being the kind of wife she wanted to be, not on changing her husband. Something amazing happened. As she changed, the entire dynamic of the marriage shifted. Her husband responded to her genuine love and began changing too. /n/n Covey emphasizes this is not manipulation. She wasn't being nice to get something. She was exercising her freedom to choose her own behavior regardless of circumstances. That's true proactivity. And often, when we change ourselves, we create ripple effects that change our environment. /n/n Now, why does Covey believe proactivity is the foundation of all other habits? Because without it, none of the other habits are possible. If you believe you're a victim of circumstances, you cannot set meaningful goals. You cannot prioritize effectively. You cannot build strong relationships. You're too busy reacting to take control. /n/n Proactivity is about accepting that you are the creative force in your own life. You are not a product of your circumstances, your conditioning, or your genetics. Those things influence you, but they do not determine you. Between stimulus and response, you have the power to choose. /n/n This is empowering but also sobering. If you have the power to choose, then you are responsible for your life. You cannot blame others for your unhappiness. You cannot excuse poor behavior by pointing to your past or your problems. You must own your choices and their consequences. /n/n Covey acknowledges this responsibility feels heavy sometimes. It's easier to be a victim, to blame others, to make excuses. But that ease comes at a terrible cost. You give away your power. You become helpless. And helplessness is the opposite of effectiveness. /n/n Let's talk about practical takeaways. How can you apply this habit starting today? First, listen to your language for one full day. Notice how often you use reactive phrases. Count them if possible. I have to. You make me. I can't. If only. Each time you catch yourself, pause and rephrase proactively. /n/n This simple exercise raises your awareness. You might be shocked by how often you speak reactively. That's okay. Awareness is the first step to change. Once you hear your reactive language, you can begin to change it. And changing your language will begin to change your thinking. /n/n Second, identify one problem that's been bothering you. Write it down. Now draw 2 circles on paper. In the outer circle, list everything about this problem that you cannot control. In the inner circle, list everything you can actually influence. Be honest and specific. /n/n Most people discover their circle of influence is larger than they thought. Even in difficult situations, there are always some things you can control: your attitude, your effort, your response, your next action. Focus all your energy on that inner circle for the next week. Stop worrying about the outer circle, /n/n third, make one small commitment to yourself and keep it for 7 days. Not a huge life change, just one small promise. Wake up at a certain time. Exercise for 10 minutes. Read for 15 minutes. Call someone you care about. The specific commitment matters less than keeping it, /n/n when you keep this small promise, you prove to yourself that you are trustworthy. You build your integrity account. You expand your circle of influence. Then, next week, add another small commitment. Build slowly and sustainably, /n/n Covey reminds us that becoming proactive is a process, not an event. We all have reactive tendencies. We all blame circumstances sometimes. The goal is not perfection but progress. Each time you choose a proactive response, you strengthen that muscle. Each time you focus on your circle of influence, it grows, /n/n The beautiful truth is that proactivity is always available to you. No matter what happened yesterday, no matter what's happening around you right now, you have the power to choose your response in this moment. That power cannot be taken from you unless you give it away, /n/n Remember Viktor Frankl in the concentration camp. Remember the man who changed his relationship with his daughter. Remember the woman who transformed her marriage. They all discovered the same truth: between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is the power to choose. And in that choice lies your freedom and your growth, /n/n We continue through this series on the 7 habits. We'll build on this foundation of proactivity. The second habit will help you define what you want to create with your power to choose. The third habit will help you execute on those priorities. But it all starts here, with recognizing and exercising your power to choose, /n/n You are not a leaf blown by the wind. You are not a victim of circumstances. You are a human being with the unique ability to examine your own thoughts, to imagine different futures, to act based on principles rather than conditions. This is your birthright. This is your power, /n/n The question is not whether you have this power. You do. The question is, will you use it? Will you take responsibility for your life? Will you focus on what you can influence? Will you choose your responses instead of reacting automatically? Will you make and keep commitments to yourself, /n/n These questions matter because how you answer them determines the entire trajectory of your life. Choose proactivity, and you begin a journey toward effectiveness, fulfillment, and genuine contribution. Choose reactivity, and you remain stuck, helpless, always waiting for circumstances to improve, /n/n The choice, as always, is yours. And that is both the challenge and the gift of being human. You have the power to choose. Use it wisely. Use it today. Start small, but start. Your future self is counting on the choices you make right now, in this moment, /n/n Our next episode, we'll explore habit 2, begin with the end in mind. We'll discover how to create a personal vision that guides all your choices and actions. But that vision only matters if you have the proactive power to pursue it. So practice this first habit. Master it. Let it become part of who you are. Everything else builds on this foundation.